In the year 2425, the galaxy had been under the control of the Galactic Council for centuries. This council consisted of powerful species, each with their own advanced technology and vast fleets, who had long maintained a fragile peace. They thought they had seen it all, but no one could challenge their dominance. But they hadn't anticipated humanity. Earth, a planet once considered insignificant and far from the major galactic powers, had been steadily growing in influence. Over the past century, humans had spread across the stars, colonizing distant worlds, developing new technologies, and making allies out of species that were once considered beyond their reach. Yet, despite their progress, humans had never developed the colossal fleets or massive armies that the Galactic Council possessed. They were a young, ambitious race with promise, but still small in comparison to the older, more established empires. This, however, did not stop the Tiburon Empire, a race of aggressive, insectoid conquerors, from seeing humanity as an easy target. The Tiburons, with their vast warships and overwhelming numbers, had long believed that no species could challenge their might, and they had set their sights on humanity. The Tiburons issued a harsh ultimatum: Earth would either surrender to the Empire or face complete annihilation. It was not a request, it was a command. The message was clear: humanity's time had come to an end. The Galactic Council had long ago warned Earth's leaders about the dangers of provoking such a powerful species, but the humans were far more resilient than the Council had ever imagined. Earth's leadership, understanding the gravity of the situation, did not crumble under the pressure. They chose defiance over submission, prepared to stand their ground against a force much larger and stronger than their own. The Human Interstellar Defense Force, HIDF, a growing military force, was quickly mobilized. The Earth's commanders knew they didn't have the numbers or the firepower to match the Tiburons in a direct confrontation, but they had something else: their ingenuity, their creativity, and an unshakable resolve to protect their home. Every human ship that went into space now carried more than just weapons. It carried the belief that humanity was not a species to be crushed without a fight. The Tiburons, though confident in their victory, underestimated humanity's ability to adapt and fight back. To them, Earth was just another weak, inexperienced race that would fall in line once they showed their power. They didn't realize that humans were anything but predictable. They didn't realize that humans, while new to the galactic stage, had a fierce will to survive, one that could not be crushed by simple threats or brute force. The humans were no longer the underdogs. They were a force in the making. As the Tiburons advanced toward Earth's star system, their fleet looming in the darkness of space, something remarkable happened. The first human ship to make contact with the Tiburon fleet was the Defiant, a vessel unlike anything the Tiburons had ever seen. It was small, sleek, and agile, designed specifically to outmaneuver the larger, slower ships of the Empire. The Tiburons, who had expected an easy victory, now found themselves facing a fight they hadn't anticipated. The human ship danced around their massive warships with uncanny precision, striking hard and fast before disappearing into the darkness once again. The Tiburons were left stunned, unsure of what to make of this sudden turn of events. But it wasn't just the advanced technology of the Defiant that had the Tiburons questioning their strategy. It was the humans' ability to think on their feet, to find solutions where none seemed possible. The first skirmish between the Tiburons and the humans ended in an unexpected victory for Earth. The humans, with their one ship, had crippled an entire Tiburon battalion, leaving the Empire in shock. The Tiburons had underestimated humanity's resolve, and now they were starting to realize that perhaps they had made a fatal mistake. As the days turned into weeks, the Tiburons tried to regroup, sending more ships and reinforcements to Earth's system. But each time, the Defiant struck back, hitting key targets and disappearing into the vastness of space. It wasn't just about the battles. It was about the message humanity was sending. They were not a weak race to be crushed beneath the heel of the Tiburon Empire. They were a species that would not go down without a fight. And with every strike, the Tiburons found themselves less certain of their victory. The war had only just begun, but already the Empire was beginning to understand that humanity was a far more dangerous adversary than they had ever imagined. The Tiburon fleet surged through the cold void of space, an armada of thousands of warships, each brimming with the power to annihilate entire planets. They moved with terrifying speed toward Earth's system, their intent clear: to destroy humanity and claim the galaxy as their own. The Galactic Council had long warned that humanity was too weak to survive such a conflict, and now the Tiburons were about to make an example of Earth. The stars in their path seemed to tremble as the might of the Empire approached, their ships gliding like giants with the weight of inevitability. The Earth's forces, by contrast, were small and far outmatched, their ships few and their technology primitive compared to the Tiburon war machine. But humanity had one weapon the Tiburons didn't count on: a ship called the Defiant. The Defiant was not just any warship. It was the product of Earth's greatest minds working together in secret, a technological marvel unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Constructed from a blend of advanced alloys scavenged from alien wreckages, it was far more than just a machine of war. With an unthinkable level of maneuverability, it was designed to do what no one thought possible: to strike fast, hit hard, and vanish before the enemy even had a chance to respond. But it wasn't the ship alone that made the Defiant so dangerous. It was the mind of its captain, Elena Corrigan. A brilliant strategist, Corrigan had risen to command the Defiant after proving herself in the early skirmishes of the war. Her calm under pressure and ability to outthink her opponents made her a living legend, and she was about to show the Tiburons just what humanity was capable of. As the massive Tiburon flagship drew into range, Captain Corrigan stood at the helm of the Defiant, watching as the enemy fleet filled the viewports. She knew this was the moment. The Tiburons thought they had all but won, and they would never see her coming. With a quiet command, the engines of the Defiant roared to life. In an instant, the ship shot forward with blinding speed, darting through space like a comet. The Tiburon ships, massive and slow in comparison, barely registered the attack before the first series of blinding energy blasts tore through their hulls. The Defiant danced between the Tiburon warships with remarkable agility, dodging incoming fire as it picked off the smaller, more vulnerable ships one by one. In just hours, over a dozen Tiburon vessels had been destroyed. Each strike was quick and calculated, each move carefully planned. Corrigan's tactics were nothing short of genius, attacking with precision and then retreating before the Tiburons could respond, using the ship's speed and advanced stealth systems to stay one step ahead. The Tiburon fleet, accustomed to their overwhelming dominance, was caught off guard. Their larger ships couldn't keep up, and their weapons were too slow to track the Defiant as it darted through their ranks. Panic spread through the enemy lines, and for the first time, the Tiburons realized that they had underestimated humanity. The battle, though brief, was catastrophic for the Tiburons. They had never faced an adversary who fought so unpredictably. Their arrogance had clouded their judgment, and they found themselves reeling from the unexpected losses. The Tiburon flagship, a massive warship bristling with weapons, issued orders for full retreat, but it was already too late. The damage had been done. News of the attack quickly spread throughout the Tiburon Empire, and the Emperor himself was furious. He had been assured by his generals that Earth would fall without a fight, and now a single human ship had torn through his forces with devastating ease. The Emperor's fury was matched only by his desire for vengeance. He vowed to destroy humanity once and for all. He would make Earth pay for this humiliation. Back on Earth, the news of the Defiant's victory sent waves of shock and hope across the planet. Humanity had just struck a blow against the most powerful empire in the galaxy, and it had all been thanks to one ship and one captain. But Captain Corrigan and her crew knew this was only the beginning. The Tiburons would not forgive the humiliation they had suffered. They would return with greater force. Yet, in that brief moment of triumph, humanity had made a powerful statement to the galaxy. They were not to be dismissed. They were not weak. And no matter how big the enemy, humanity would fight back with everything they had. The Tiberans, shaken but far from broken, began preparing for their next move. The Emperor's wrath would be unrelenting. Earth had just drawn the attention of the most feared empire in the galaxy, and the Defiant had only begun to show them what it could do. As the war between humanity and the Tiberan Empire raged on, the once confident Tiberan fleet began to show signs of faltering. The massive insectoid warships, which had once dominated the skies of the galaxy, now faced an opponent they hadn't expected, a race that, despite being outnumbered and outgunned, was proving to be far more dangerous than the Tiberans had ever imagined. The Tiberans had underestimated humanity's adaptability. While their fleets were powerful and their technology advanced, they failed to see what made humans so resilient: an unyielding spirit of resourcefulness and an ability to think beyond conventional tactics. It wasn't just about fighting back. It was about using everything at their disposal to outwit a superior enemy. And that's exactly what Captain Elena Corrigan and the crew of the Defiant were doing. With the Defiant leading the charge, humanity had begun to adapt quickly. The initial strikes had sent shockwaves through the Tiberan ranks, but as the war dragged on, the Tiberans regrouped and became more cautious. However, Captain Corrigan wasn't finished. She understood that the Tiberans' strength lay in their sheer numbers and brute force. To fight them head-on was a battle humanity couldn't afford to lose, so she switched tactics. Rather than face the Tiberans in direct conflict, she orchestrated a series of fast, calculated strikes against their vulnerable supply lines and weapon depots. These were targets that were often overlooked by larger empires, not by the Defiant. Joined by several smaller but highly advanced human ships, the human fleet launched daring hit-and-run attacks. These weren't just random assaults, they were precise and deadly. The ships would appear out of nowhere, striking the Tiberan supply ships and destroying vital resources before vanishing back into the darkness of space. No matter how hard the Tiberans tried to track them, the humans always managed to stay one step ahead. It was as if the Defiant and its companions were ghosts, leaving nothing but destruction in their wake. The Tiberans, caught completely off guard by the sudden, unexpected nature of these attacks, found themselves scrambling to protect their critical supplies. The situation grew dire as the Tiberans realized that without their resources, they would struggle to maintain their fleets. Their once dominant war machine was beginning to crack. Captain Corrigan's success wasn't just about the attacks themselves. It was the way she used the human strengths that the Tiberans couldn't comprehend. Humanity wasn't just following the same old rules of war. Instead, they were rewriting the playbook, using their ingenuity to outthink the enemy. While the Tiberans relied on brute force and overwhelming numbers, the humans relied on their creativity, their ability to adapt, and their deep sense of unity in the face of adversity. Corrigan had not only turned the tide in space, but also inspired hope back on Earth. Her leadership and tactics were now becoming legendary, spreading across the galaxy like wildfire. As the war went on, the reputation of humanity grew, no longer as a weak young species, but as one that was bold, relentless, and capable of extraordinary feats. But this newfound strength didn't just affect the Tiberans, it affected everyone watching. The once dismissed human race, once considered a small and insignificant player in the galaxy, was now being recognized as a force to be reckoned with. Other species, watching from the sidelines, were beginning to take notice. The humans' ingenuity and sheer willpower had made them a formidable opponent in ways that the Tiberans, with all their might, had never expected. The Tiberans, who had once believed that humanity would crumble under their assault, were now facing a growing resistance that they couldn't easily crush. The realization hit the Tiberan High Command like a cold slap in the face. They had misjudged humanity. And now, every day they spent in this war only made them realize how dangerous that mistake had been. Back on Earth, the human leaders knew that the war was far from over. The Tiberans would strike back with even more force, no doubt. But they also knew something the Tiberans did not. Humanity was no longer fighting just for survival. They were fighting for something much greater: their freedom, the future of their people, and the hope that they could change the course of history. Captain Corrigan and her fleet had sparked something larger than just a resistance. They had sparked a revolution, a movement that was spreading throughout the galaxy, showing that even the smallest spark could ignite a fire that no empire, no matter how mighty, could extinguish. The Tiberans, with all their arrogance and might, had made a fatal mistake. They had underestimated humanity, and now they were beginning to feel the weight of that error. The war had reached its most dangerous point. The Tiberan Empire, now desperate to crush humanity once and for all, launched a massive strike fleet toward Earth. Their forces, vast and brutal, moved through the stars with unrelenting speed, and their target was clear: Earth itself. The Tiberans believed this would be the final blow, the one that would end humanity's defiance. They would bombard the planet into oblivion, ensuring that no trace of human life remained. For years, Earth had been on the defensive, but now it seemed that the Tiberans had finally gathered enough power to destroy the homeworld of the species they once considered insignificant. The people of Earth braced for the worst. The situation was dire, and even Captain Elena Corrigan, the brilliant leader of the Defiant, could see that the odds were stacking against them. The humans had fought fiercely, striking where the Tiberans least expected, but their fleet was small, and the Tiberans might seem overwhelming. Just as the Tiberan strike fleet began its final approach, a sudden, unexpected twist of fate would change the course of the war. Hidden deep beneath the surface of Earth, buried miles below the rock and oceans, lay a secret weapon that humanity had kept hidden for centuries. It had been Earth's final defense, a weapon that could turn the tide of battle in an instant. The Tiberans had no idea it existed, and they were about to learn the hard way that humanity had prepared for this moment. The base was known only to a select few, its location kept hidden from even the highest levels of the government. Deep underground, it housed the Judicator, a colossal battle station that had been secretly built over the course of decades. The technology it was built from was so advanced, so far beyond anything the Tiberans had ever encountered, that it seemed almost like a myth. The Judicator was powered by an energy source so potent that it could obliterate entire fleets with a single strike. It was Earth's last hope, and now it was ready. The Tiberans had no idea what was about to hit them. As the Tiberan fleet closed in on Earth, the Defiant led the charge, its crew fighting valiantly to hold the line. The humans fought with everything they had, but the reality was clear: they were outmatched. Just as the Tiberans prepared to unleash their full fury on Earth, the ground beneath their feet trembled. The Judicator's weapon activated. The first blast was so powerful that it sent a shockwave through space, a wave of energy so intense it tore through the heart of the Tiberan fleet. Ships were obliterated in an instant, their massive hulls disintegrating under the weight of the strike. The Tiberans had never seen anything like it. They had thought themselves unstoppable, but now they were crumbling before a power they had never expected. The Judicator's weapon was not just a weapon of destruction, it was a weapon of utter annihilation. The Tiberans, who had once stood proud as the galaxy's most feared empire, were now reeling from the devastation. Their flagship, the symbol of their power, was reduced to debris, its once mighty engines flickering and dying. The rest of their fleet scattered, retreating in chaos as the remaining ships tried to flee the wrath of humanity's secret weapon. But it was too late. The once invincible Tiberan war machine had been crippled in one fell swoop. As the smoke of the battle cleared, the Tiberans realized that their empire was in ruins. Their fleet was shattered, their forces scattered, and their confidence shattered. They had underestimated humanity's ability to surprise them, and now they were facing their own destruction. The humans, who had once been seen as weak and unworthy of notice, had proven that they were more than capable of defending their home and their future. The Tiberan Empire, once so proud and powerful, was now on the brink of collapse. The aftermath of the battle was a moment of triumph for Earth, but it was also a warning to the galaxy. Humanity had fought not just for survival, but for the freedom to shape their own destiny. The Tiberans, in their arrogance, had thought that they could wipe out a species they deemed inferior. But in the end, it was the humans who stood victorious, having shown the universe that they were a force to be reckoned with. The tide of the war had turned. Earth had won, and with it, a new chapter in galactic history was written, a chapter where humanity, once overlooked and underestimated, would no longer be ignored. The Tiburon Empire, broken and shattered, would never recover from the defeat they had suffered. The war was over, and humanity had emerged not just as survivors, but as victors. The Tiburon Empire, battered and broken, was on the brink of collapse. Their once mighty fleet had been obliterated, their flagship reduced to nothing but space debris, and their proud empire was teetering on the edge of annihilation. The Judicator, Earth's ultimate weapon, had unleashed devastation unlike anything the Tiburons had ever seen, and the consequences of underestimating humanity were now painfully clear. The Tiburons, who had once declared war with the certainty of victory, now faced the grim reality of their failure. Their leaders, desperate to avoid complete destruction, made a last-ditch attempt to save their empire. They reached out with an offer of peace, hoping to negotiate a way out of their inevitable downfall. But Captain Elena Corrigan, the unyielding commander of the Defiant, had no intention of simply accepting a peace deal. She wasn't about to let the Tiburons off the hook so easily, not after the years of destruction they had caused. She saw their peace overtures for what they were, a desperate plea for survival. The Tiburons, humbled and broken, had no power left to threaten humanity, and Corrigan knew this was the moment to not just end the war, but to reshape the galaxy forever. Instead of accepting their offer, she played a dangerous gambit. She would give the Tiburon Emperor one final choice: surrender completely, or face the total destruction of everything he had built. The Tiburon Emperor, sitting in his shattered palace deep within the heart of his empire, had no illusions left. His fleets were decimated, his resources dwindling, and the Judicator, still fully operational, stood as a constant reminder of humanity's power. The Tiburons, who had once believed their empire was untouchable, were now on the verge of extinction. Faced with Corrigan's ultimatum, the Emperor knew there was no option but to comply. His empire, the mighty force that had dominated the galaxy for centuries, was now reduced to a shell of its former self, and the humans, whom they had once dismissed as weak, had proven themselves far stronger than anyone had imagined. The Tiburons were broken, and there was no turning back. But Corrigan wasn't interested in just ending the war. She had a vision far greater than simple victory. She had a chance to change the very fabric of the galaxy. Her terms were bold, even audacious. She didn't just want the Tiburons to surrender, she wanted to reshape the galaxy's power dynamics. The Tiburon Empire, once the galaxy's most feared force, would now become part of a new order. Under her leadership, humanity would lead the creation of a galactic alliance where no single species could dominate another. It would be a place where peace, cooperation, and equality could thrive, a stark contrast to the Tiburon Empire's brutal, hierarchical rule. Corrigan's demand was revolutionary. She wasn't just fighting for humanity's survival or even for revenge. She was fighting for a new vision of the galaxy, one where the cycle of war and domination could finally come to an end. The Tiburon Empire, though broken, still controlled vast swaths of territory and resources, and Corrigan knew that their compliance would be key in securing the new order she envisioned. She wasn't interested in vengeance, she wanted transformation. The message was clear: if the Tiburons wanted to survive, they would have to accept humanity's leadership and become part of something bigger than their empire. The Emperor, though humiliated, saw the logic in Corrigan's proposal. His people had been crushed, their fleets shattered. To resist further would only lead to the total destruction of what remained of his empire. And yet, the idea of being subsumed into a new order, under the leadership of humanity, was a bitter pill to swallow. The Tiburon Empire had never known anything other than domination. The idea of equality, cooperation, and peace with species they had once seen as beneath them was almost unthinkable. But in the end, the Emperor had no choice. The Tiburons would bow to humanity's will, or they would perish. Corrigan's gamble paid off. The Tiburon Emperor, with no other options, agreed to humanity's terms. The Tiburon Empire would join the new galactic order, and humanity would lead the way. The war had ended, but a new chapter in the galaxy's history was about to begin. The Tiburons, who had once thought themselves invincible, were now part of a greater alliance, one where no species would rule over another. Humanity, once a fledgling species on the edge of the galaxy, had not only survived the war, but had emerged as the leaders of a new era. This wasn't just a victory. It was the dawn of a new galactic age, where the mistakes of the past would not be repeated, and peace would be built on the foundation of unity, strength, and cooperation. Captain Elena Corrigan had not just won the war, she had changed the galaxy forever. The galaxy was in turmoil. The Tiburon Empire, once the most powerful force in the stars, had been broken, its fleet shattered, its emperor humiliated, all by the unlikeliest of opponents, humanity. The Galactic Council, the long-standing and often unyielding governing body of the galaxy, had watched from a distance as the humans fought their way through the war, defeating the Tiburons with an unexpected combination of resourcefulness, cunning, and sheer tenacity. The Council, composed of species who had long ruled over the galaxy, had dismissed humanity as weak and insignificant. They had underestimated the human spirit, and now, in the wake of the Tiburons' defeat, they found themselves with no choice but to reconsider. Captain Elena Corrigan, who had led the humans to victory, stood at the forefront of this new era. Earth, once a distant and seemingly inconsequential planet, had now become a central player in galactic politics. As the war ended and the Tiburons grudgingly signed the peace treaty, the once dismissed humans had earned the respect of the galaxy. The Council, however, was not one to relinquish power easily. For centuries, they had maintained control over the galaxy with an iron fist, keeping species in line through fear and dominance. Humanity's rise had shaken that order to its core, but the Council was not quick to admit their vulnerability. Instead, they did what they always did. They sent a delegation to Earth, hoping to negotiate a new arrangement. Their goal was simple: to reinstate the balance of power, ensuring that the status quo remained, with humanity remaining on the fringes. Captain Corrigan, however, was not intimidated by the arrival of the Galactic Council's representatives. She had faced the Tiburon fleet head-on and won. Dealing with the Council was an entirely different challenge, but one she was prepared for. The delegation, a mix of species with centuries of political experience, arrived on Earth with the air of those who believed they were still in control. But Corrigan was a woman with a vision, and it wasn't one that involved simply bowing to the established powers. Her goal was clear: to create a galaxy where humanity's values of freedom, unity, and innovation became the foundation for all species, not just the few that had ruled for eons. As the Council members stepped onto Earth, they found a world radically different from the one they had known. Earth, now a beacon of strength and leadership, was not a place where they could impose their will easily. Corrigan's vision for the future of the galaxy was one where cooperation took precedence over dominance, where every species had a voice, and where peace was not just an illusion maintained by force, but a reality built on mutual respect. The Tiburons, once the galaxy's most ruthless and feared species, had already aligned themselves with humanity, agreeing to become part of the new order Corrigan was creating. Their cooperation, though born of necessity, was a powerful statement to the rest of the galaxy. If the Tiburons could change, so could others. The Galactic Council's representatives quickly realized that they were not dealing with the same humanity they had dismissed before. Corrigan and Earth's leadership were resolute in their stance. They had no intention of simply becoming a part of the existing order. Instead, they proposed a new vision, one where the balance of power was shared equally between all species. The Council's delegation, which had expected to negotiate from a position of strength, was now faced with the uncomfortable reality that humanity was no longer the weak, inconsequential race they had once assumed. Corrigan made it clear: if the galaxy wanted peace, it would be on humanity's terms, with freedom for all. The tension in the room was palpable as the negotiations began. The council, though powerful, was now forced to listen. They had no choice but to recognize that humanity was no longer just a fledgling species on the fringes of galactic politics. They had become the leaders of a new movement, one that promised to transform the galaxy. The Galactic Council, for all its power, was now a reluctant participant in a new age. It was a humbling moment for them, as they realized they could no longer dictate the fate of the galaxy without considering humanity's influence. Influence. In the end, Captain Corrigan's gamble paid off. The Council, faced with the undeniable reality of humanity's strength and resolve, agreed to the terms laid out by Earth. A new galactic order, one that placed equality and cooperation at its core, was born. It was a monumental shift, not just for humanity, but for the entire galaxy. The old ways were gone, and a new era had begun, one where no species would dominate another, and the power to shape the future was in the hands of all, not just a privileged few. The Council, once the undisputed rulers of the stars, had been forced to adapt or risk being left behind in the face of humanity's unstoppable rise. The galaxy, once a vast expanse ruled by the powerful and the ruthless, had entered a new chapter. The peace negotiations, long thought impossible, had finally concluded with the Galactic Council's reluctant acceptance of humanity's vision for the future. The Tiburon Empire, once a symbol of fear and tyranny, now stood alongside Earth, not as a conqueror, but as an equal partner in a new order. The once unchallenged supremacy of the powerful species was over, and humanity had rewritten the rules of intergalactic politics. It wasn't just the defeat of a single empire, it was the birth of a new era. As the final terms of the treaty were signed, Captain Elena Corrigan stood on the bridge of the Defiant, gazing out at the stars. The battles were over, the war that had defined so much of humanity's recent history now nothing more than a distant memory. Yet, the weight of what had been achieved still hung heavy in the air. The galaxy had witnessed the impossible, the rise of a species thought to be insignificant, a species that had not only survived but had thrived. In the face of overwhelming odds, humanity had proven itself capable of much more than anyone had ever imagined. They had not just defended their home, they had transformed the entire fabric of galactic power. The Tiburons, once their greatest enemies, now stood as allies, bound by the same agreement that would shape the future for all species. The negotiations had not been easy. The Galactic Council had come to Earth with the intent to maintain the old order, to keep the balance of power firmly in their grasp. But Captain Corrigan had not relented. She had made it clear that humanity would not simply be a player in the galaxy's grand game. They would be the ones to lead it. No longer would the strong oppress the weak. No longer would might make right. The new order that humanity proposed was one of equality, cooperation, and mutual respect. It was an order where every species had a voice, where power was shared, and where peace was not just a fleeting hope, but a lasting reality. The Tiburons had joined humanity in this vision, their empire, once a conqueror, now a part of a broader, more inclusive future. As Captain Corrigan stood at the helm of the Defiant, her heart swelled with pride. She had seen humanity through the darkest of times, guiding her people through battles that seemed impossible to win. But now, she looked out at the stars, knowing that humanity had earned its place among them. Earth, once a fragile blue planet in the corner of the galaxy, had become a beacon of hope and strength. The Tiburons, now reformed, stood beside Earth as equals, not as conquerors. Together, they would usher in an era of peace. But it was more than just an era of peace. It was a time of boundless potential. Humanity, with its relentless drive and its capacity for innovation and unity, would lead the galaxy into a new age. For the first time in millennia, the galaxy had a chance to thrive. The once dominant species, who had lorded over others with arrogance and power, were now part of a united front that valued cooperation above all else. The destruction wrought by centuries of warfare had left its scars, but there was now hope where there had been only conflict. The foundation for a brighter future had been laid, and it was humanity's unwavering determination that had made it possible. They had proven that no matter how small or insignificant a species might seem, with the right will, the right leadership, and the courage to stand up for what was right, anything was possible. The galaxy had learned an undeniable truth: never underestimate humanity. The species that had once been dismissed, even scorned, had become its greatest hope. They had stood against the might of the Tiberans, had faced overwhelming odds, and had triumphed. Now, as Earth stood at the center of a new, peaceful galaxy, Captain Corrigan knew that the future was theirs to shape. Humanity had not only survived, they had become the very architects of a new era of peace, power, and cooperation. The war was over, but the work had just begun, and for the first time, the stars seemed endless with possibilities.